Gene therapy may yet be a long way from delivering the miracles foreseen at the dawn of the genetic revolution. Jesse Gelsinger's death was a severe setback. The leukemia side effect of the SCID treatment, however, is even more damaging. In Gelsinger's case, it seems that unpardonable mismanagement was largely responsible, a problem that has hopefully been fixed by tighter regulation. But there is no ready solution to the side effect problem. Probably we will have to rely on the depressing calculus that applies in this case, that gene therapy has at least cured a condition, SCID, worse than the one it has caused, leukemia. The good news is that the baby boy in question is apparently responding well to the chemotherapy used to treat the leukemia. However, between them, the Gelsinger and leukemia incidents have crystallized many of the difficult issues that need yet to be resolved if somatic gene therapy is to enter the medical mainstream. And I am not so naive as to deny that future trials will likely uncover yet more difficulties. It may be some time before we can claim beyond doubt to have neutralized every conceivable danger. But I nevertheless believe that the potential of this technology to lift the curse of genetic disease is simply too great for medicine to turn away from it. Your DNA can tell someone a lot about you. As we've seen, if Huntington runs in your family, your DNA can literally reveal your future. Soon, depending on whether you possess a particular variant of a gene or combination of genes, DNA may also speak to your relative risk of succumbing to common killers like heart disease. What version you have of the APO gene can already serve as a predictor of Alzheimer. But should you worry that this profoundly personal information might be used against you? Not surprisingly, for many Americans, the greatest concern is that genetic profiling may one day lead to their being denied health care insurance. In 2000, the American Journal of Human Genetics published the results of a survey that had asked health insurers whether they would adjust rates to take account of genetic information, if it were available to them. Would they, in principle, be prepared to charge more for a customer in perfect health who carried a mutation predisposing him or her to a disorder? About 2/3 admitted they would. The other third were in all likelihood lying. Insurance companies are not philanthropies, but businesses with shareholders to please. There's no reason to suppose that, left to their own devices, they wouldn't do what they've always done: maximize the premiums of those at risk, and where possible, avoid altogether those customers most likely to collect. The same report described a case where an insurance company raised an individual's rates based on a suspicion of a genetic disorder, merely because this individual had requested a diagnostic test for Huntington disease. As we come to know ourselves at the molecular level, is it inevitable that those of us who have drawn the short straws in the genetic lottery will be made to pay a price in this way and others? And why presume such abuse would begin and end with insurers? My DNA profile might show that I am likely to have a heart attack or stroke, become an alcoholic, or suffer clinical depression. Might such information cause a prospective employer to think twice about hiring me? Such questions suggest that brave new world may be upon us, well before the 25th century of Huxley's imagination. DNA is a potent factor of 21st century life, a genie that will never be put back in the bottle. What we allow to be done with it, however, is something we must decide as a democratic society. Unfortunately, in such societies, laws tend to lag behind the need for them. A traffic light isn't typically installed at a dangerous intersection until after a few accidents have occurred. It may require a few horror stories of gross injustice, of individuals made the victims of their own genomes, to motivate the passage of appropriate legislation. What should it look like? Genetic privacy should be a touchstone, but not necessarily the ultimate objective. balances will need to be struck with society's other priorities, not least the fight against disease, an effort whose progress will more and more depend on giving medical researchers access to as much genetic data as can be collected from the general population. While legislation ought not defeat our ambition to exploit the full potential of DNA to alleviate human suffering, or to tell us about ourselves and our origins, or to identify those among us guilty of crimes, it must minimally ensure that no citizen be deprived of civil or human rights on the basis of what might be inscribed in his or her genes. Meanwhile, it may be a comfort to know that, despite a wealth of genetic information already at the industry's disposal, and regardless of what they tell pollsters, insurance companies have on the whole shown little impulse toward factoring genetic considerations into their calculations for setting rates. The wretched pale skin I inherited has already proved its susceptibility to cancer. But the last time I looked, I still wasn't being charged a higher premium for it. Again, the rationale is business, not charity. Insurers have traditionally set rates using actuarial tables that estimate overall health and longevity, mainly on the basis of how we live. I suspect that even if genetic data were universally available, insurers would still find such lifestyle factors, whether one smokes or not, whether one works in a coal mine as opposed to a flower shop, vastly more predictive of one's health risk than the overwhelming majority of relatively subtle differences determined by genetic variation from one person to another. It's indisputable that those whose DNA reveals an unavoidable destiny of debilitation need special protection under the law. But the propensity toward ailments like heart disease and cancer are certain to prove so widespread and complicated as to make them an impractical basis for cost-cutting discriminations. The essential premise of insurance, that payments of the happy many, who never have cause to collect, will underwrite the relief of the unfortunate few, is not likely to be abolished owing to the accumulation of any amount of genetic information.